put a factor. One can never get too much practice factoring. Even though we've had a lot. Just give you some. I think once you do a few, it'll come back to you. Now, it doesn't matter if I make that equal to 0 or not. If I say this is an expression, not an equation, can you factor it? You should still be able to factor. First step?
Take out an x.
When you say take out an x, that sounds like factor out an x, which you cannot do. In other words, what we're going to do, here's what factoring is. Factoring is the reverse of multiplication. If I gave you two linear factors, if I told you x minus 2 times x plus 3, and I said multiply that together, you would FOIL it, right?
Yep.
And you would end up with x squared plus x minus 6. So what factoring is it takes the result and unmultiplies it, tries to figure out what you started with. That's what factoring is. Okay? Nothing mysterious. It's just the reverse of FOILing. So the first step we know is that and that. Step 2?
Signs.
What are they?
Positive, negative.
Signs are always determined by the sign on the constant, unless it's a plus, and then you know that both signs are the same, and they would have to be the sign of the middle term. But in this case, for sure, one's negative and one's positive, and it doesn't matter which one goes where, as long as the coefficient of the x terms here are the same. As long as they're the same, it doesn't matter where the plus goes and where the minus goes. Now, what's the third step?
Factors, so
Verbalize it to me.
it's positive 6 and negative 3.
Yeah,
So
factors.
it's factors. There's factors of both 3 and 18.
No,
when added together.
18. Just factors of 18
Factors
only.
of 18. That multiply to negative 18.
And not minus 18 necessarily. We've already got the minus sign accounted for by our plus and minus. So I'm looking for factors of 18 that subtract, because of that, to the number 3. Always the third step. Unless this is a plus sign. And then you would be saying factors of 18 that add to the number 3. Well, what factors of 18 subtract to 3? You had it, 6 and 3. Where do each go?
The 6 goes in the positive, and the 3 goes in the negative. Because you have to end up with a positive 3.
Let's do one more. Step 1. What's step 2?
Signs, so you need to have, I'm going to say 2 negatives.
Yeah, they have to be the same, because only two signs that are the same can produce a plus 14. But
it's a negative because your middle term is
negative or plus plus. And that's always determined by the sign of the middle term. The moment you know that the signs have to be the same, then it's got to be minus minus. Now, step 3, and this is the last step here. In other words, since the signs are the same, we don't have to figure out which factor goes with which side. So, verbalize it.
Um, 7 and 2, because
Factors
factors of 14 are 7 and 2.
that add to the number 9. When I
So,
say verbalize, that's what I'd like to hear. Is factors
okay.
of 14 that add, because of that plus sign, to the number 9. Not the minus 9, but to the number 9. And that's 7 and 2. Perfect. Okay? All right. Any quadratic that has a 1 in front of the x squared is what I call a first degree quadratic. In other words, it's really quite simple to factor. You can use those 3 or 4 steps. No more are needed. Just those 3 or 4 steps, depending on whether that's a plus sign or a minus sign, to solve all problems like this. They only get hard when you start putting a number in front of that. Something like this. That would be really hard because there's lots of combinations. And I can't use any of those simple rules like factors of 14 that add to the number 9. That gets thrown out the door when you're doing these kind of quadratics. These become much more trial and error. Just kind of have to experiment a little bit. You will be expected to know these, and they will teach those, and they may even teach you a special method called the diamond method or the California method or something. But I hate that method. I think it's confusing and complicated, unnecessarily so. And it still
Yeah.
comes down to a trial and error process even with that method. So these become tougher. But let's make sure you get these mastered first, the first level. All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Cole.
Sounds good.
You have a good week, and I will talk to you next Monday.
Talk to you next Monday.